What if you drove into a town that wasn't on any map, and everyone there swore they'd known you your whole life? The rain was coming down hard that night, turning the Texas highway into a slick ribbon of black glass. Daniel Reeves squinted through the wipers, his eyes stinging with exhaustion. He'd been on the road for 12 straight hours, leaving Houston in the early morning and aiming to reach Amarillo before midnight. His father had passed 2 weeks ago, and the funeral was tomorrow. There was no chance he could be late. But somewhere past Wichita Falls, his GPS flickered and went dark. "Great," he muttered, smacking the dashboard. His phone showed no service, no signal, just an empty map with a blinking blue dot. He hadn't passed another car in almost an hour. That's when he saw the sign. It appeared out of the rain, glowing in his headlights. A crooked wooden board painted white with peeling letters. "Welcome to Graybrook." Daniel frowned. He'd driven this route plenty of times before, visiting family up north, and he'd never once seen a town by that name. No exit markers, no billboards, nothing. Still, his gas gauge was dipping close to empty, and the thought of sleeping in his car on the side of the road in a thunderstorm made his skin crawl. He turned off the highway. The road curved gently through thick trees, then widened into a street lined with old-style lamps that flickered against the fog. Houses appeared on either side, 2-story Victorians, front porches sagging under the weight of rain. Yet every window glowed with warm yellow light, and shadows moved inside. Daniel slowed the car, heart pounding. It looked alive. By the time he reached the center of town, the storm had quieted. The street opened into a wide square, with a fountain at the middle. Shops lined the perimeter: Graybrook General Store, Marston's Butcher, Lydia's Diner. Their windows shone bright, as if it were the middle of the day, not midnight in the middle of nowhere. He parked outside the diner. The bell jingled as he stepped inside. The air smelled of coffee and bacon grease, warm and inviting. A jukebox in the corner hummed softly, playing an old Patsy Cline tune. A dozen people sat scattered across booths, sipping coffee and chatting. They all stopped when they saw him. Then, one by one, their faces broke into smiles. "Well, I'll be damned," an older man at the counter said. "Danny Reeves. Back in Graybrook after all this time." Daniel froze. His blood turned cold. No one here should know his name. The waitress, a woman in her 40s with auburn hair tucked into a bun, walked up with a steaming mug of coffee. "It's been too long, sweetheart," she said warmly. "Your mama must be so proud, you finally came home." Daniel's throat went dry. I think you've got the wrong person. I've never been here before." The entire diner chuckled softly, as if he'd told a joke. "Nonsense," the old man at the counter said. "We watched you grow up. You used to fish with my boy down by Mill Creek. Don't you remember?" Daniel backed toward the door, panic prickling his skin. "No. I swear, I've never heard of this place. I don't know any of you." The waitress tilted her head. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes, there was something strange in them, something heavy. "You must be tired from the drive. Sit down, Danny. Things'll make sense in the morning." The crowd nodded, murmuring agreement. In the morning. Daniel shoved open the door and stumbled back into the rain. His car was still there, engine cooling, headlights dimmed. He jumped in, heart racing, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. He spun the wheel, tires screeching as he tore down the street and back toward the highway. Only, there was no highway. The road wound endlessly through trees, stretching longer with every turn. He drove for 10 minutes. 20. 30. No exit, no signs, no way out. Just the same lamps, the same dripping branches arching over the road. Finally, headlights glowed ahead. Relief flooded him. Another car. but as it drew closer, his stomach dropped. It was his own car. The same make, model, color, even the dent on the front bumper from last winter's accident. And worse, the driver inside was him. His own face staring back in shock before the light swallowed him. Daniel slammed the brakes, heart hammering, and the vision vanished. Only darkness ahead. He turned around, desperate, but the road curved back into the town square. The fountain trickled softly. The diner lights glowed, welcoming. And on every building, the same sign now hung in the window. "Welcome home, Danny." Daniel's hands trembled on the wheel. His breath came in shallow gasps. And then he saw them. The people from the diner, standing silently outside in the rain, ringed around his car. Watching. Smiling. He hit the lock button. The doors clicked shut. One of them, the waitress, stepped forward, her face calm, her eyes unblinking. She raised a hand and pointed to the fountain in the square. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice carrying strangely through the glass. "It begins tomorrow." The crowd echoed in unison. Tomorrow. Daniel pressed the accelerator. Tires squealed, water splashed, but no matter which street he turned down, he ended up circling back to the square. Trapped. The fountain gurgled louder now, as if mocking him. And in its dark waters, ripples spread, though the rain had stopped. Something was moving beneath the surface. Daniel sat frozen behind the wheel, his fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight they ached. The fountain at the center of the square gurgled, louder than before, its black surface rippling even though the rain had stopped. It looked alive, as though something beneath it was pushing against the water, waiting to break free. Around him, the townsfolk still stood in silence, their smiles steady and unnatural, eyes fixed on him like he was both a long-lost child and a cornered animal. His breath fogged the windshield as he struggled to think. He could floor the gas, plow through them, maybe find a way out, but the thought of mowing down people who, at least on the surface, looked perfectly human made his stomach twist. Instead, he killed the headlights and ducked low in his seat, praying the darkness would hide him. But the silence outside was worse. He could hear their feet shifting faintly on the wet pavement, water dripping from their clothes, their synchronized breathing like a slow tide. Minutes passed. He dared a glance up, and nearly screamed. The waitress was now standing directly at his window, her face inches from the glass. Her smile was still there, but her eyes looked almost glassy, unblinking, too wide to be normal. She raised her hand, not to touch the glass but to point again, always to the fountain. Daniel couldn't take it anymore. He turned the ignition, revved the engine, and shot forward, weaving through the figures. They didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even try to get out of the way. But somehow he didn't hit a single one of them. It was like they weren't truly there, like phantoms occupying flesh. When he looked in the mirror, they were still standing in the square exactly as before, not a hair or a raindrop disturbed. By now panic had numbed him. He drove aimlessly down every street he could find, searching for an exit, but the town seemed endless. Streets bent and twisted in strange loops. He passed the same houses multiple times, each with glowing windows and swaying curtains, but never saw anyone inside. After what felt like an hour of driving, he found himself back where he started, the square, the fountain, the diner, all unchanged, as though time hadn't moved at all. His gas gauge was almost empty. He had no choice. He pulled over on the far side of the square, killed the engine, and sat in the dark, trying to slow his racing thoughts. He needed to figure out what was happening. Logic told him it was impossible. Towns don't just appear out of nowhere, full of people who knew your name, people who remembered things that never happened. Yet his gut told him this was real, too real. The fountain gurgled louder, drawing his eyes again. He hated how it pulled at him, how even the thought of walking over to it made a strange, heavy curiosity rise in his chest. He blinked hard, shaking himself. No. He wasn't about to wander into some trap. Then a sound cut through the night. "Danny." The voice was faint but unmistakable. His heart clenched. It was his father's voice. Daniel's skin went cold. His father was dead. He'd buried him 2 weeks ago. But the voice came again, clearer this time, drifting on the night air. "Danny, son, come to me." The sound was coming from the fountain. Daniel stumbled out of the car before he could think, the door slamming behind him. His shoes slapped against the wet pavement as he moved closer, every instinct screaming at him to run the other way. Yet his father's voice was too strong, too familiar. The fountain bubbled and hissed, the water now churning violently. He could almost make out shapes beneath the surface, dark, shifting outlines pressing upward, waiting. As he neared the fountain, the townsfolk began to move. They didn't walk like normal people. Their steps were too synchronized, too fluid, like dancers following an invisible rhythm. They spread into a wide circle around him, leaving only the fountain in front of him, their eyes glimmering faintly in the lamplight. He wanted to scream, to tell them to stop, but his throat had closed up. The water exploded upward. Daniel fell back as icy spray drenched him, and a shape rose from the fountain, tall, human-like, but made entirely of water and shadow. Its face shifted, blurred, until it formed something he recognized. His father's face. "Danny," the figure said, voice warping between liquid and human. "You're home." Daniel scrambled backward on his hands, but the townsfolk closed in tighter. Their smiles had vanished now, their faces were solemn, reverent, eyes locked on the watery figure as though it were holy. The shadow father leaned closer, its watery features trembling, breaking apart, reforming. "You tried to leave," it said, voice layered with tones that weren't his father's. "But you know you can't. You belong here, Danny. You always have." "No!" Daniel shouted, forcing his voice out. "I don't belong here. I've never been here before in my life." The townsfolk all murmured together, the sound low and heavy. "He belongs. He belongs. He belongs." The watery face twisted, its resemblance to his father fading into something darker, hungrier. Its eyes glowed faintly from within, like lanterns beneath the surface. "You've forgotten," it hissed. "But we'll remind you. Tomorrow." The word tomorrow echoed from the circle of people, their voices rising until it shook the air. "Tomorrow. Tomorrow. Tomorrow." Daniel clapped his hands over his ears, but the sound wasn't just outside, it was inside his skull, vibrating through his bones. His vision blurred, and for a moment he thought he would pass out. Then, silence. When he dared to look, the fountain was calm again, only water trickling gently. The townsfolk were gone, vanished like mist. The square was empty, every building dark now, the lamps extinguished. Only his car remained, sitting silently on the far side of the square. Daniel staggered toward it, shivering uncontrollably. He climbed inside, locked the doors, and curled into the seat. His body ached, his mind swirled, but exhaustion finally pulled him under. Before he drifted off, he swore he heard one last whisper outside his window, soft, gentle, almost tender. "Sleep well, Danny. Tomorrow comes soon." When Daniel awoke, the car was cold and damp, his body stiff from sleeping curled in the driver's seat. For a moment, he thought it had all been a dream, the diner, the fountain, the phantom face of his father rising from black water. But then he sat up, rubbed his eyes, and saw where he was. The square was still there. The fountain still gurgled in the center, though its waters looked calm and ordinary now, like nothing strange had ever happened. The sun was rising behind the clouds, painting the sky in dull streaks of gray. A heavy fog clung low to the streets, blurring the outlines of the buildings. For the first time since he arrived, the town looked almost normal. Almost. His stomach growled, and he realized he hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. Against his better judgment, he stepped out of the car and crossed toward the diner. Maybe it was foolish, but he needed answers, and people were more likely to talk in daylight. If they truly believed they knew him, if they really thought he belonged here, he could at least try to learn what they thought they knew. The bell jingled as he pushed open the door. The diner smelled exactly the same as it had the night before: coffee, bacon, faint grease, and the jukebox still played softly in the corner. Only now, the booths were filled with townsfolk eating breakfast. Toast. Eggs. Pancakes. The ordinary hum of conversation filled the air, but as soon as Daniel stepped inside, silence fell. Every face turned toward him, and every face smiled. The waitress appeared again, auburn hair neat in its bun, her eyes sparkling too brightly. "Morning, Danny," she said sweetly. "Thought you might be hungry." She didn't even wait for him to order, just guided him to a booth by the window and set down a steaming plate of scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast. A mug of black coffee followed, the kind his father always drank. "I didn't," he began, but she cut him off with a finger pressed gently to his lips. "Eat. You'll feel better. Then we can talk." The others returned to their meals, though Daniel noticed their eyes flick back to him constantly, like actors in a play making sure the audience hadn't left. He hesitated but finally picked up his fork. His stomach screamed for food, and the first bite tasted impossibly good, like something he hadn't eaten in years but loved as a child. Familiar. Comforting. Wrong. The waitress slid into the booth across from him, hands folded neatly. "I know you're confused," she said softly. "But you'll remember in time. Everyone does." Daniel set down his fork. "I told you last night, I've never been here before. I don't know any of you. I don't know this town." Her smile didn't fade, but something flickered behind her eyes, something less patient, less kind. "That's the thing, Danny. Graybrook doesn't forget its own. Even if you try to forget us." He leaned back, pulse quickening. "Why do you keep calling me that? I'm not from here. My father was from Amarillo, my mother's from Dallas. I grew up in Houston. I don't know this place." The waitress tilted her head like a bird, eyes narrowing. "Your father?" she asked. "Oh, yes. We knew him, too." Daniel froze. His fork clattered onto the plate. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "He left, Danny. Years ago. Tried to pretend this place wasn't part of him. But Graybrook always calls its own back. And now," she touched his hand gently, almost like a mother soothing a child, "it's your turn." His throat went dry. He wanted to shout at her, demand she stop lying, but the words caught in his chest. Instead, he yanked his hand back and stood so quickly his chair scraped loud against the floor. All eyes in the diner turned to him again, every conversation stopping mid-sentence. Dozens of smiles, fixed and waiting. Daniel shoved his way outside, gulping the fog-thick air. His father. Could it be possible? His father had been secretive at times, quiet about his own childhood. But he'd never once mentioned a town called Graybrook. Never once hinted at this place, these people. And yet, hadn't the watery figure in the fountain looked like him? Hadn't it spoken in his voice? Daniel shook the thought away. No. He wasn't going to believe this madness. He needed proof. He needed to look around, find something that wasn't part of this staged nightmare. He started walking. The streets twisted like a maze, houses too perfectly aligned, too identical in their subtle details. Each porch had a rocking chair swaying gently, though the air was still. Curtains moved in windows, but whenever he stopped to look, the glass reflected only his own face. Children's laughter echoed faintly from a side street, but when he turned the corner, there were no children, only chalk drawings on the sidewalk, fresh and bright. Finally, he spotted the Graybrook General Store. Its wide front window displayed old-fashioned goods, glass jars of candy, rows of canned peaches, dusty bottles of soda. The door creaked as he stepped inside. Behind the counter stood a tall man in suspenders, polishing a glass with a rag. He looked up and grinned. "Danny Reeves. Thought you'd drop by sooner or later." Daniel forced himself to stay calm. "I need to know where I am. Do you have a map? A phone I can use?" The man chuckled, setting the glass down. "Maps won't help you here, son. Phones don't either. You should know that by now." Daniel's fists clenched. "I don't know that. I don't know any of this. Just tell me the truth, what is this place? Why can't I leave?" The man's grin faltered for the first time. He glanced at the back room, then leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Some things ain't meant to be left, Danny. Graybrook finds its own, no matter how far they run. You'll see soon enough." Daniel opened his mouth to argue, but a sudden movement caught his eye. On a shelf behind the counter sat a row of framed photographs, black and white portraits of townsfolk. His stomach dropped. One photo showed a boy, maybe 12 years old, smiling awkwardly at the camera. The boy looked exactly like him. His knees went weak. He stumbled closer, staring at the photo. The resemblance was uncanny, same eyes, same jawline, even the faint scar above his eyebrow he'd gotten from a bicycle crash when he was 11. But that was impossible. His fingers trembled as he lifted the frame. "What the hell is this?" he whispered. The shopkeeper only smiled again, slow and knowing. "Welcome home, Danny. You've always been here." Daniel stared at the photograph until his vision blurred. The boy in the frame, his wide eyes, crooked smile, the faint scar above his brow, was him. Not just a resemblance, not a coincidence. It was his childhood face staring back at him from decades ago. His chest tightened with a nauseating pressure, as though the room had shrunk around him. This is a trick," he muttered, gripping the frame so hard the glass rattled. "Photoshop. Fake. It isn't real." The shopkeeper's expression softened into something almost pitying, though his eyes still glimmered with that unnatural certainty. "There ain't no tricks here, Danny. Not in Graybrook. That picture's been hanging on that shelf for longer than I can remember. Folks bring in old photos sometimes, keep the memories alive. Your ma gave us that one." Daniel snapped his head up. "My mother?" The man nodded, calm as ever. "Sweet woman. Stubborn, though. She left with your pa, tried to take you away. We knew she'd regret it someday. But now you're back, just like we always knew you would be." The words buzzed in Daniel's ears, hollow and wrong. His mother had never once mentioned this place. Not once. How could she? She'd grown up in Dallas, worked her whole life as a nurse, lived in Houston until the day she died. Yet the certainty in the man's tone burrowed into Daniel's skull like a worm. He set the photo down carefully, as if afraid it might burn him, and backed away from the counter. "You're lying. You're all lying." The shopkeeper didn't argue. He only watched him with that same patient smile, as if Daniel's denial was just another step in a script he'd already seen performed. Daniel bolted out of the store, the bell above the door jangling wildly. The fog outside was thicker now, clinging to his clothes, muffling the world. Every house he passed looked the same, porches with rocking chairs swaying, curtains twitching as though someone just stepped aside. He could feel eyes on him, countless eyes, though the streets were empty. His mind spun. If the photo was real, if somehow it wasn't a trick, then his parents had lied to him his entire life. Lied about where he was born, lied about who he was. The thought was so heavy it nearly buckled his knees. But no, he forced himself to reject it. His father may have been secretive, but not delusional. Not cruel. There had to be another explanation. He found himself wandering back toward the square, drawn as if by gravity. The fountain stood silent in the center, its waters calm and clear, reflecting the pale morning light. Yet even from across the street, Daniel thought he saw something beneath the surface, shapes shifting, shadows twisting just out of sight. A voice startled him from behind. "You shouldn't look too long." Daniel spun around. A girl stood a few feet away, no older than 17, her dark hair tied back with a ribbon. Unlike the others, she wasn't smiling. Her eyes darted nervously around the empty square as though afraid of being watched. "Who are you?" Daniel demanded, his voice harsher than he intended. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "My name's Clara. I've been waiting for you." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Waiting for me? Why?" She glanced at the fountain, then back at him. "Because you don't belong here. Not the way they say you do. And if you don't figure it out soon, you'll never leave." Her words hit him like a jolt of electricity. Finally, someone who wasn't parroting the same script of belonging, of welcome, of inevitability. "You know what this place is? You know how I can get out?" Clara nodded slowly. "I know some of it. Not all. I've only been here 3 years. 3 years? Daniel frowned. "So, you weren't born here?" Her lips tightened. "No. I was driving with my parents on vacation. We took a wrong turn. Graybrook found us. My parents, they didn't last long." Her eyes shimmered with unspoken grief. "But I learned. I survived. If you want to survive too, you'll have to listen to me." Daniel's heart thudded. "What is this place, Clara? Why are we here? Why can't we leave?" She hesitated, scanning the foggy streets again. When she spoke, her voice trembled with both fear and urgency. "Graybrook isn't a town. It's a hunger. A kind of wound that pretends to be a place. It builds itself from people's memories, makes itself feel real so you'll believe you belong. Once you accept it, you're trapped forever." Daniel swallowed hard, his skin prickling with cold sweat. "And the people here? The ones in the diner, the store?" "They aren't people," Clara whispered. "Not really. They're pieces of it. Masks it wears to keep you calm, to make you think you're safe. They look like neighbors, like family, like friends, but they're just echoes of something deeper. Something that wants you." Daniel felt his legs go weak. He braced himself against a lamppost, his breath coming fast. It all made a twisted kind of sense, the way the people seemed too synchronized, too rehearsed, their smiles too perfect. The photo in the shop. The watery figure of his father. None of it was real, not in the way he'd believed. But Clara wasn't finished. "The longer you stay, the harder it gets to remember what's real," she said. "It'll use your memories, twist them until you can't tell if they're yours or its. That's how it feeds. That's how it keeps you." Daniel's throat was dry. "Then how do we stop it? How do we get out?" Clara's eyes darkened. "You can't destroy it. Not from the outside. The only way out is to find the part of you it's holding on to, the memory, the piece of yourself it's using to tether you here. If you can take it back, you might escape. But if you fail," she glanced again at the fountain, her voice dropping to a whisper. "If you fail, you become part of it. Forever." The fountain gurgled loudly, almost like it was laughing. Ripples spread across its black surface, and for a moment, Daniel swore he saw faces beneath the water, hundreds of faces, mouths open in silent screams. His father's was among them. A chill deeper than fear coursed through him. He turned back to Clara, desperate. "Then tell me, what memory is it holding? What does it want from me?" Her face paled, and for the first time, she looked frightened. She reached out, clutching his arm tight. That's just it, Danny, she whispered. The memory isn't missing. It's hidden. And the closer you get to finding it, the more it'll fight to keep you here. Suddenly, the diner doors slammed open across the square. Dozens of townsfolk spilled out, their faces all fixed in identical smiles. They moved as one, turning toward Daniel and Clara. Clara's grip tightened. Run. They ran. Daniel and Clara tore across the square, shoes slapping against wet pavement, the fog thickening like a living thing that wanted to swallow them whole. Behind them, the townsfolk moved in eerie synchronization, their footsteps echoing in perfect unison, their smiles fixed as if stitched onto their faces. They didn't shout, didn't call out, only advanced with silent, relentless certainty, arms outstretched as though ready to embrace. Where do we go? Daniel hissed, nearly stumbling as Clara yanked him toward a side street. Not the highway, it'll just lead you back here, Clara gasped. We need somewhere to hide until they stop. The streets twisted unnaturally, the houses warping in the fog. Daniel could swear some of them weren't even the same as before, porches longer, shutters a different color, windows taller, as if the town itself was reshaping with every step they took. It felt less like running through streets and more like running through a dream that kept rewriting itself. Clara darted suddenly into a narrow alley between two leaning houses. The passage was choked with weeds and broken crates, but she didn't hesitate. Daniel followed, nearly slamming into her when she stopped at a door halfway down. She shoved it open and pulled him inside. They stumbled into darkness. Clara slammed the door shut and pressed her back against it, breathing hard. Daniel blinked, letting his eyes adjust. They were in what looked like an old storage room, dusty shelves lined with jars of cloudy preserves, stacks of crates, the faint smell of mildew heavy in the air. A single cracked window let in a sliver of foggy daylight. Clara raised a finger to her lips, motioning for silence. Outside, the synchronized footsteps slowed, then stopped. Daniel's heart pounded so hard he thought they would hear it. For several long seconds, there was only silence. Then, faintly, a whisper. Tomorrow. The words slid through the fog like a breath, carried by dozens of voices speaking as one. Daniel's skin prickled. The footsteps resumed, fading away until the square was silent once more. Only then did Clara let out a shaky breath. She slid to the floor, hugging her knees. They'll be back. They always come back. But we bought some time. Daniel sank against the opposite wall, chest heaving. What the hell are they? What do they want from me? Clara didn't answer right away. She rubbed her hands together nervously, as if working up the courage. They want what Graybrook always wants, she said finally. Pieces of you. Memories, feelings, moments. The more it takes, the less you remember who you are. Until you can't tell where you end and it begins. Daniel shook his head, trying to anchor himself in something real. But why me? Why my family? My dad never, he stopped, the words choking in his throat. His father's face in the fountain flashed through his mind. His voice calling him Danny, son, come to me. Clara tilted her head. Your father was here once. I don't know when. But I've heard whispers about him. The town doesn't talk straight, but sometimes, if you listen, you catch pieces. They say your father tried to leave, but Graybrook never forgets its own. Maybe that's why it's so hungry for you. Daniel's chest tightened. He remembered his father's silence about childhood, the way he always deflected questions with a joke or a vague story. Had he been hiding this? A whole town that wasn't supposed to exist? The thought was absurd, and yet, wasn't his entire life at this point absurd? He rubbed his face with trembling hands. You said it holds on with memories. How do I even find the memory it's using? How do I know what's mine and what's, whatever this is? Clara hesitated, then reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small object, a tarnished locket on a thin chain. She handed it to him. Daniel opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph of Clara as a little girl, smiling on the steps of a house. The same house he had seen earlier on the corner of Pine Street. "That house isn't mine," Clara whispered, her voice cracking. "I was born in Illinois. I've never lived here, never seen that house before. Graybrook put it in front of me. But the longer I stay, the more I feel like I did live there. I remember sitting on that porch. I remember playing jump rope on that street. I remember neighbors' names that aren't real." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Graybrook gave me those memories. Slipped them into my head like seeds. And if I hold on to them too long, I start to believe. That's what it wants, for me to forget who I really am." Daniel stared at the photo, cold dread crawling up his spine. Was that what was happening to him? Was that why he felt flickers of familiarity in the diner's food, in the faces of strangers, even in the streets themselves? "I can't," he swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I can't let it do that to me." "Then you need to find the real memory," Clara said. "The thing that ties you here. Once you find it, you can cut it loose. But it'll fight you every step of the way." Daniel closed the locket and handed it back to her. His mind reeled, but he forced himself to focus. "Then we start now. Where do we look?" Clara hesitated, chewing her lip. Finally, she said, "There's a place. The library. It's not like the others. Sometimes, it shows the truth. Not all of it, but enough." Before Daniel could ask more, a noise cut through the silence. A slow creak, coming from the far side of the room. He turned. A door stood there, half hidden by crates. It hadn't been there when they entered, he was certain of it. Now it stood slightly ajar, darkness yawning beyond. Something moved inside. A faint shuffle. Then, a voice. A child's voice. "Danny, come play." Daniel's blood froze. His childhood voice. The same tone, the same lilt, echoing from the dark. Clara grabbed his arm, nails digging into his skin. "Don't listen," she hissed. "Whatever it shows you, don't believe it." But the door creaked wider on its own, the shadows deepening. And for a split second, Daniel saw himself, an 11-year-old boy with messy hair and scraped knees, smiling from the darkness, beckoning him forward. For a long moment, Daniel couldn't breathe. The child in the doorway was him, his face, his hair, even the small scar on his chin from when he fell off his bike at 10 years old. Yet something was wrong with the boy's eyes. They were too bright, almost glowing, and his smile stretched unnaturally, like it had been carved too wide into his cheeks. "Danny," the boy coaxed again, rocking back and forth on his heels. His voice was high, playful, but it carried a strange echo, as though dozens of whispers hid beneath it. "Come outside. Everyone's waiting." Daniel's body swayed involuntarily, his feet twitching as if they wanted to move forward on their own. For a split second, he smelled cut grass and summer heat, heard the faint buzz of cicadas, and felt the familiar warmth of childhood afternoons. A wave of nostalgia hit him so hard it ached in his chest. It felt real, too real. Clara's grip on his arm tightened like iron. "That's not you," she whispered fiercely. "It's the town using your memories. If you step through, you'll never come back." The boy tilted his head at her, expression darkening. "She doesn't belong here," he said flatly. His voice had lost its playful edge. "You know she doesn't. She's only making it worse. She'll ruin everything." Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. The boy's words weren't just an attack, they burrowed straight into his doubt. He barely knew Clara. How could he trust her more than himself? Or at least a version of himself? He shook his head, forcing himself to take a step back. "You're not me," he said, though his voice trembled. "You're just The child's grin widened until it seemed impossible for his face to stretch further. "Not you," the boy interrupted. "I'm the only real you left. All those years you've been pretending to be grown, pretending to be someone else." I remember the truth. The shelves around them rattled. Jars of preserves vibrated violently, some crashing to the floor and shattering, spilling rancid fruit across the boards. The air thickened until it felt like syrup in Daniel's lungs. Clara pulled him toward the opposite wall. "We have to move," she said urgently. "Now." Daniel stumbled after her, but the boy stepped fully into the room, bare feet leaving wet prints on the wood, though there was no water anywhere. The door behind him vanished, leaving nothing but rotting plaster where it had been. "Don't run from me," the boy said. His voice was layered now, dozens of voices spilling out at once, men, women, children, all overlapping until Daniel's head throbbed. "You can't outrun what you are." Clara yanked Daniel toward the cracked window. Without hesitation, she smashed it open with her elbow. Glass rained down, slicing her skin, but she didn't flinch. "Go!" she shouted. Daniel clambered through first, landing on the damp earth outside. Clara followed, her sleeve torn and bleeding, but she didn't pause. She grabbed his wrist and pulled him into a sprint once again. Behind them, the house groaned. Windows shattered one by one, as though invisible fists were breaking free. The boy's laughter rang out, echoing across the street in a pitch that made Daniel's bones feel brittle. The fog outside had thickened into near blindness. Shapes loomed on either side, houses, lampposts, maybe even figures moving silently just beyond reach. Clara guided him with sharp turns, darting between alleys, until finally they stumbled into an open space. Daniel looked up, chest heaving. It was the library. The building loomed tall and wrong, its architecture mismatched like a collage. Columns from one era, windows from another, a roofline that slanted unevenly. The front doors were enormous, black and oak, carved with symbols that hurt to look at, spirals, eyes, jagged lines that seemed to move if he stared too long. Clara didn't hesitate. She pushed the doors, and they opened silently, too easily, as though the building had been waiting for them. Inside, the air shifted. The fog did not follow. Instead, the library smelled faintly of old paper, wood polish, and dust. It was quiet. Too quiet. Rows upon rows of shelves stretched into the distance, but the shelves were uneven. Some leaned at strange angles, others impossibly tall, their tops lost in shadow. The books themselves varied wildly, ancient tomes bound in leather, flimsy paperbacks, journals, even stacks of loose papers tied together with twine. Daniel felt a strange pull as soon as he stepped in. The air here was heavy, charged, as though the library was aware of him. "This place," Clara whispered, her voice reverent and fearful at once. "It doesn't belong to Graybrook, not entirely. It's older. Sometimes it shows things as they really are. Sometimes." Daniel turned in a slow circle, heart hammering. "And you think my memory, my connection, is here?" Clara nodded. "If you want to know why the town wants you, why your father," she stopped, biting her lip hard enough to draw blood. "The truth will be here. But truth has a cost." Daniel swallowed, throat dry. He didn't ask what she meant by cost. He already knew, deep down, that nothing in Graybrook came without a price. He moved forward cautiously, eyes scanning the shelves. As he passed, books seemed to shift. Some trembled, others slid out slightly as though urging him to open them. The further he went, the louder the sound became, a faint scratching, whispering, like pages turning themselves. Then, halfway down an aisle, one book fell to the floor. It landed with a heavy thud, pages fanning open. The spine was cracked, the cover blank. But as Daniel bent to pick it up, he froze. The open page held a photograph. A family photograph. his father, younger, standing with a woman Daniel didn't recognize. And between them, Daniel himself, maybe 6 years old, grinning. But the background wasn't his childhood home. It was the very square he had seen earlier, the clock tower looming in the distance. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He remembered no such picture. No such day. But staring at it, he felt the faintest flicker of memory stir, running across the square as a child, his father's hand clutching his tightly, his mother's laughter echoing in the air. Except, his mother had died when he was 3. Hadn't she? The photograph trembled in his hands, as if the page itself was alive. Clara knelt beside him, eyes wide with terror. "Daniel," she whispered, "don't look too long. That's how it starts. You have to decide what's real before Graybrook decides for you." Daniel tore his gaze from the image, his stomach twisting violently. His hands shook as he closed the book. He wanted to throw it away, to run, but something inside him, the same gnawing pull that had been there since he first entered Graybrook, wouldn't let him. Somewhere, deep in the library, a bell tolled once. The sound rolled through the shelves like thunder, low and endless. And then, from the shadows at the far end of the aisle, a figure stepped forward. It was his father. Not the twisted, drowned version from the fountain, but whole, solid, alive. His eyes fixed on Daniel, full of sadness and warning. "You shouldn't have come here, son," his father said softly. "You'll never find your way out." Daniel's chest locked tight, his breath hitching as if invisible hands pressed against his ribs. His father stood only a few feet away, bathed in the dim glow of lanterns that seemed to flicker to life above the shelves on their own accord. The man looked solid, alive, no water dripping from his skin, no lifeless glaze in his eyes. He looked almost exactly as Daniel remembered from childhood, tall, broad-shouldered, with that same rugged jaw and the faint crease across his forehead that deepened whenever he was troubled. Yet something about his presence sent an icy shiver crawling down Daniel's spine. This was not a man returned from the dead, this was something that had chosen to wear his father. "Dad," Daniel whispered, his voice breaking. He wanted to run forward, to embrace him, to demand answers. But his legs refused to move. He felt both the son yearning for a father's comfort and the grown man who knew nothing in Graybrook could be trusted. The man smiled faintly, the kind of tired smile a parent gives when trying to soften a hard truth. "I told you once, you'd be better off never knowing," his father said. His voice echoed softly down the aisle, as though the books themselves carried his words. "But you couldn't stay away. None of you ever can." Clara stepped forward, positioning herself slightly between Daniel and the figure. Her voice was low, taut, like a wire ready to snap. "You're not his father," she hissed. "You're just another mask. The town is full of them." The man's eyes slid toward her, darkening with something dangerous. "Ah," he said slowly. "One of them. A guide. A scavenger." He tilted his head. "Tell me, girl, how many have you led here? How many walked in with hope burning in their eyes, and how many walked out with nothing but ash inside their heads?" Clara stiffened, her jaw tightening, but she didn't respond. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until Daniel finally found his voice. "If you're not my dad," he said carefully, "then why do you look like him? Why are you showing me these pictures, these memories that don't exist?" The man's smile didn't falter, but his eyes softened into something mournful. "Because you wouldn't listen otherwise. Because deep down, you know the truth. Your childhood isn't yours. The laughter, the scars, the places you think you remember, they belong to Graybrook. You're not a visitor here, Daniel. You're one of us." The words hit him like a physical blow. His knees almost buckled, and his mind reeled in protest. One of us? Impossible. He had grown up states away, in a normal house, with a mother who had died young, a father who raised him alone until his own mysterious disappearance. He had friends, schools, jobs, a whole life. Hadn't he? Clara grabbed his wrist, her nails biting into his skin. "Don't listen," she urged, her eyes sharp with desperation. "That's how it feeds. It makes you doubt. It fills and cracks with its own story until you can't tell where you end and Graybrook begins." But the doubt had already begun to take root. Images flickered at the edges of Daniel's mind: birthday parties in the square, his father's laugh as he swung him over a fountain, his mother's voice calling from a window. Memories that felt real in their weight, their texture, their detail. And yet he could not remember when they had ever happened. The man, his father, or not, took a slow step forward. "She's lying to you, son. She wants you to forget. But you've always been ours. Why do you think you came back? Why do you think the town opened its gates for you?" Daniel stumbled back, shaking his head. "No," he whispered. "I came because my dad disappeared. Because I had to know." The figure's expression twisted into something strange: sadness, pride, and inevitability all at once. "And now you do." The shelves around them groaned. Books began to slide from their places, falling one by one, then in cascades, until the floor was littered with open pages. The words on them shifted and crawled like insects, rearranging themselves into shapes Daniel couldn't understand. The sound grew deafening: whispers, scratching, the creak of wood as the library seemed to breathe. Clara yanked Daniel sideways, pulling him down a different aisle. "We have to move," she cried. "If we stay, the library will rewrite you." Daniel let her drag him, though his gaze kept flicking back. The figure that looked like his father did not follow. He simply watched, his lips curving into a whisper Daniel could barely hear over the cacophony. "You'll come back." The aisles twisted, endless. They turned corner after corner, but the shelves seemed to rearrange themselves, leading them in circles. Once, Daniel thought he saw a staircase spiraling upward into darkness, but when he blinked, it was gone. The air pressed heavier and heavier against his lungs, and every step felt like moving deeper into a dream. Finally, they burst into a clearing of sorts, a wide reading hall. Dozens of tables stretched before them, but each table was wrong. Instead of books, they held objects. Toys, jewelry, wallets, photographs, clothing, all items scattered neatly in rows. Some looked old, coated in dust, while others seemed recent, as if dropped there only yesterday. Daniel's stomach turned. He recognized some of them. A baseball glove he'd owned as a kid. A red backpack from middle school. A set of car keys he was sure he had lost years ago. Clara stopped, her face pale. "These are anchors," she whispered. "Pieces of people who came here. The library keeps them, so the town can call them back." Daniel reached out, trembling, and touched the red backpack. The moment his fingers brushed the fabric, a violent rush of images flooded his head, running through a forest, laughter at a campfire, the glow of street lamps in Graybrook. He staggered back with a gasp, his vision blurring. Clara grabbed his shoulders. "Don't touch anything. That's how it binds you tighter." Daniel's head spun, his pulse racing. He felt as if the ground beneath him were tilting, sliding him toward a truth he wasn't ready to face. And then, at the far end of the hall, he saw movement. A figure sat at one of the tables, head bowed as if reading. Long fingers turned the pages of a book, slow and deliberate. The lantern light caught on pale hair, a bent posture. Daniel froze. His heart clenched. It was his mother. The woman he remembered only in faint impressions of warmth and lullabies. The woman who had died when he was 3. She lifted her head, and her eyes locked onto his with a recognition that pierced him to the bone. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice carrying clear across the hall. "You finally came home." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he forgot the suffocating atmosphere of the library, the rows of lost belongings, and even Clara's urgent grip on his arm. All he could see was her, his mother. She looked older than the faint memories he carried, but not impossibly so. Her hair, a shade lighter than his own, fell in tired waves around her shoulders. Her eyes were softer than he remembered, lined with years he never got to witness. And yet, her presence radiated something disturbingly familiar, as though she had been waiting here, in this impossible town, all along. "Mom," the word escaped Daniel in a whisper, fragile and trembling. He hadn't spoken it in years, hadn't dared. For as long as he could remember, she had been little more than an absence, a photograph tucked in a drawer, a half-remembered melody. And now she was here, sitting calmly at a table in the heart of a nightmare. Clara's grip tightened on his wrist. "Don't," she warned, her voice low, trembling with urgency. "It's not her. It can't be her." But Daniel barely heard. His legs moved of their own accord, carrying him across the hall. Each step echoed hollowly, swallowed by the oppressive silence of the library. His mother's gaze never left his, and the faintest trace of a smile curved her lips, a smile both loving and heavy with sorrow. When he reached her table, he saw the book she had been reading. Its pages were filled not with words but with images, photographs of his life. He saw himself as a boy, standing beside his father at a fishing dock. He saw birthdays, classrooms, blurry teenage years. The book contained every memory he thought belonged to him. And on the page she rested her hand, he saw something that turned his blood cold, an image of him standing in this very library, face pale, eyes wide with horror. Daniel recoiled, his voice breaking. What is this? How do you have this?" His mother's hand drifted to the book, her fingers brushing the edge of the page. "Because, Daniel, this place doesn't just take lives, it keeps them. Every moment you've lived, every step you've taken, it belongs to Graybrook. It has always belonged here." Clara appeared at his side, her face tight with fury and fear. "No," she snapped. "Don't listen. It's the same trick over and over. It shows you what you ache for. It steals the faces of the people you've lost. That isn't your mother, it's the town." But his mother, if that's what she was, turned her eyes on Clara, and for the first time, there was a sharpness in them, like steel. "And what are you, girl? A thief? A scavenger who leads the lost like cattle into the jaws of Graybrook, pretending you can guide them away, when all you really do is feed it more souls? Tell me, how many have you really saved?" Clara froze, her jaw working silently. For a heartbeat, Daniel saw something raw flicker across her face. Guilt. Doubt. Daniel shook his head violently, refusing to accept either side of what he was hearing. "Stop it. Both of you." His voice cracked against the vaulted ceiling. "None of this makes sense. My mom died when I was a kid. I buried her. I remember the funeral. I remember." "Do you?" his mother interrupted softly. She leaned closer, her eyes searching his as though peeling away layers of him. "Or do you remember what the town wanted you to remember? Daniel, you've always belonged to Graybrook. You were born of it. You left because it allowed you to leave. And now you've returned, because it called you back." Her words struck him like a hammer, reverberating through his skull. 1,000 fragments of memory churned within him, colliding violently, nights at home with his father, laughter in a backyard he thought he recognized, but now blurred with unfamiliar trees and a skyline he couldn't place. He saw himself standing in streets that looked suspiciously like Graybrook, though he had no conscious recollection of living there. Clara's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. "Daniel. Look at me." She gripped his arm, forcing his eyes to hers. "This town thrives on rewriting you. It weaves you into its fabric until you can't tell what's yours and what's its. That's how it traps you. That's how it feeds." Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. He looked back at the figure of his mother, who now rose slowly from her chair. Her movements were graceful, but with every step she took, the library seemed to warp slightly, the shelves bending inward, the lanterns flickering, the air thickening like syrup. When she reached him, she lifted her hand and pressed her palm gently against his cheek. Her touch was warm, achingly real. He nearly collapsed under the weight of it. "My sweet boy," she whispered. "You've been running from yourself for so long. But there's no running from where you came from. Graybrook is in your blood. It's why your father never truly left. It's why you can't either. You don't need to fight anymore. Just remember." Her eyes bored into his, and something inside Daniel cracked. A flood of images surged through him, drowning out reason. He saw himself as a child, standing in a dimly lit room in Graybrook, surrounded by other children whose faces blurred into shadows. He heard chants in a language he didn't understand. He saw his father standing among cloaked figures, his expression grim. He saw his mother, not dead, not gone, standing at the edge of the ritual, her eyes brimming with tears. The flood left him gasping, clutching his head. "No, no, that's not real, it's not real." Clara pulled him back roughly, her voice sharp with desperation. "Daniel. It's trying to bury you alive in its lies. You have to fight it." But Daniel wasn't sure what was real anymore. Every memory felt suspect, every thought twisted. He looked at his mother, at least, the thing wearing her face, and his chest ached with longing. If this wasn't her, then why did it feel so real? The woman smiled faintly, her hand still outstretched as if beckoning him closer. "Come home, Daniel. Come back to where you've always belonged." Daniel staggered, caught between Clara's furious grip and the impossible warmth of the mother he had lost. And then, from somewhere deeper in the library, a sound split the air, low, guttural, and echoing. The shelves trembled. The floor quaked. The lanterns sputtered and dimmed. His mother's smile faltered, and for the first time, Daniel saw something flicker behind her eyes, fear. Clara's voice was a hiss in his ear. "It's waking up." The floor trembled again, sending a shiver through the massive oak shelves of the library. Dust rained from the rafters as if the entire structure were exhaling after centuries of stillness. Daniel staggered backward, his legs heavy, his head spinning with fragments of memories, some his, some stolen. The figure of his mother, if it was truly her, turned sharply toward the sound. Her eyes widened, and the faint glow that seemed to cling to her skin flickered like a dying candle. Fear rolled across her face, stripping away the serenity she had carried only moments ago. "It's awake," she whispered, not to Daniel, not to Clara, but almost to herself. Her voice cracked. "I told it you weren't ready. I told it." A thunderous groan erupted from beneath the floorboards, so deep and resonant it rattled the books on their shelves. The sound was not merely heard but felt, vibrating in Daniel's chest, pressing into his bones. Clara dragged him back toward the nearest aisle. "Move," she hissed, her voice raw. "That's the heart of the town. You don't want to see it." But Daniel couldn't tear his gaze away. The far end of the library was shifting, the floorboards bowing upward as though something massive was pressing against them from below. The air grew heavier, every breath a struggle, as though the entire room was filling with invisible water. His mother's eyes found his again, desperation shining in them now. "Daniel, you have to listen to me. That thing, it feeds on everyone who comes here. But it doesn't want them. It wants you. That's why it called you home. That's why it's showing you all this." She took a trembling step forward. "You're its blood. You're its heir." The words hit him harder than the quaking floor. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his voice cracking under the weight of panic. "What do you mean, I'm its heir?" The floor split open with a deafening crack, and a stench poured out, a sickly mix of iron, mold, and rot, so foul Daniel gagged and stumbled. The gap widened, and through the splintered wood, something began to emerge. At first, it looked like roots, black and slick with moisture, writhing upward like tentacles searching for light. They twisted together, weaving into a shape too large, too unnatural to comprehend. Each root pulsed faintly, as though filled with thick, dark blood. The sound of it moving, the wet, fibrous stretch, set Daniel's teeth on edge. And then, within the shifting tangle, an eye opened. Massive, lidless, and luminous like a lantern soaked in blood. It fixed on him, and Daniel felt his knees buckle as a crushing weight pressed down on his chest. The eye wasn't merely looking at him, it was inside him, rifling through his memories, turning over every thought, every fear, every hidden corner of his mind. He screamed and clutched his head, but the weight only grew heavier. His vision fractured into kaleidoscopic flashes, his childhood, his father's stern face, Clara dragging him through the woods, the false warmth of his mother's touch, all of it folding in on itself. He was unraveling. Clara's arms locked around him, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. Daniel. Don't look at it. Don't let it in. That's what it wants, it can't feed unless you surrender. But his mother, still standing just beyond the glow of the lanterns, spoke over her, her voice urgent, trembling. No, Daniel. You don't understand. It's not your enemy, it's you. That's why you've never fit anywhere else. That's why you've been empty all your life. You were born to inherit this. To become what your father couldn't. Her words sank like hooks into his already fractured thoughts. He remembered nights staring at ceilings, the gnawing emptiness in his chest, the sense of being out of place everywhere he went. Could it all have been this? A calling he never knew existed until now? The massive eye blinked, and with it came a wave of whispers, low and many-layered, filling the air like a swarm of insects. They spoke his name, not once, but in unison, endless, as though every mouth in Greybrook had joined the chorus. Daniel. The shelves around them cracked and toppled, books spilling like water. The ground groaned again, the rupture widening as more of the thing below forced its way into the library. More eyes opened within the writhing roots, all of them locking onto him. The pressure built until he thought his skull would split. Clara yanked him toward the door, her voice hoarse with rage and fear. We're leaving. Now. But his mother, still impossibly calm despite the horror unfolding, took one step closer and raised her voice above the din. You can't run, Daniel. You never could. You've always belonged here. This town doesn't let go of its blood. And you are Greybrook's blood. Daniel's vision blurred with tears as the two voices warred in his head, Clara's sharp and frantic, his mother's soothing and inevitable. He didn't know which was truth anymore, whether Clara had been lying all along, using him as a pawn, or whether the mother who stood before him was only a mask, a trick of the entity clawing its way into the light. The whispers grew louder, deafening now, rising like a storm tide inside his skull. His name became a chant. His body went weak, and he collapsed to his knees, the floor vibrating beneath him as though urging him to surrender. And then the creature, the town itself, spoke. Not in whispers. Not in echoes. But in a single, thunderous voice that shook the air like thunder. Come home. The sound cracked the lanterns, plunging the library into near darkness. Daniel's body froze, trembling violently under the command. He felt himself sliding toward the fissure in the floor, not with his legs, but with something deeper, his will unraveling, his mind bending toward obedience. He clawed at the ground, fighting to hold himself back, even as every fiber of him screamed to give in. Clara dove to his side, her arms wrapped around his shoulders. Her face was streaked with tears, her jaw clenched with fury. Daniel, listen to me. If you let it take you, that's it, you're gone. And everything else, everyone else, it'll use you to finish what it started. You're stronger than this. Fight it. But his mother stepped forward too, her face luminous in the faint red glow of the eyes. Don't fight it, Daniel. Fighting will only tear you apart. Accept it. Let it in. And you'll finally be whole. You'll finally know who you are. The voices collided inside him, tearing his sanity in two. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. All he could do was stare into the abyss of Graybrook's living heart, its eyes burning into him, and feel the pull of something older, deeper, and far more powerful than he had ever imagined. And just as he felt himself slipping completely, just as the word home almost tumbled from his lips, a hand, cold and skeletal, seized his ankle from inside the fissure. The skeletal hand that seized Daniel's ankle was not warm with blood, not even cold like ice. It was worse, it was empty. Hollow, brittle, and yet unyielding, as though the grip came not from flesh and bone but from the weight of the town itself. Daniel screamed, his fingers clawing against the splintered floorboards, nails breaking, skin tearing, but the pull was relentless. From below, the fissure widened, roots shifting apart to reveal something deeper, an abyss that glowed with a faint, throbbing light. Shapes writhed in that glow, countless human forms tangled together, their faces twisted in agony, their mouths open in silent screams. Daniel saw them reaching upward, arms, hands, fingers, all clawing toward him as if begging for release. But their eyes shone with the same eerie light as the massive ones above, all locked on him with suffocating hunger. Clara yanked at his arms, screaming his name, her nails biting into his skin. Daniel! Stay with me! Don't look down, don't look at them. Her voice was raw, cracking under desperation. They're not real. They're not your family, they're its food. But Daniel couldn't look away. Among the faces writhing in the abyss, he saw his father. The man's eyes, so cold in life, burned now with a sickly glow. His mouth moved, whispering words Daniel couldn't hear, but his lips formed his son's name again and again. Daniel's chest constricted, tears spilling down his face. His mother knelt closer, her face lit by the pulsing glow. You see them now, don't you? She whispered, her tone both tender and dreadful. All the lost souls. All the blood this town has ever consumed. Your father resisted. He fought until the end. And it destroyed him. Don't make his mistake. Her hand reached out, trembling, palm open. Take your place, Daniel. End the fight. Become what you were born to be. The abyss roared beneath him, the voices of the lost merging into a howl that rattled the shelves, shattering books into confetti. The roots surged higher, wrapping around the library walls, splitting them apart. The town itself was coming alive, a beast shaking free of its disguise. The air reeked of decay and iron, so thick it coated his tongue. Daniel's mind fractured into pieces. Half of him wanted to fall, to let go, to surrender to the gravity of what his mother said. To finally stop feeling like a stranger in his own skin. The other half clung desperately to Clara's voice, to her hands pulling him back, grounding him, reminding him of the life he still had beyond this nightmare. But then, it happened. The skeletal hand at his ankle tightened, dragging him closer to the fissure. And as he thrashed, his own reflection appeared in the abyss below. Not his father's. Not the writhing souls. His. Pale, hollow-eyed, crowned in the black roots, with dozens of burning eyes sprouting from his own flesh. The reflection's lips curled into a grotesque smile as it whispered in unison with the abyss. You are the town, Daniel. The truth crashed into him like lightning. It wasn't that Graybrook had called him home. It wasn't that he was destined to rule it. He was it. The town, the roots, the entity, all of it had grown from his bloodline, seeded generations ago. His father had fought it, had tried to keep it contained, and in resisting, had been consumed. His mother had long since surrendered, becoming little more than a vessel, a mask for the thing. And now, the final cycle was here. He wasn't meant to inherit Graybrook. He was meant to become it. The realization shattered something deep inside. His veins burned as though the roots below were already inside him, spreading, threading through his blood. His heartbeat echoed in the walls, in the floor, in the howling of the abyss. The town pulsed with him, every brick, every window, every corpse light in the forest moved with his breath. Clara's voice broke through the chaos, shrill and defiant. "Daniel! Listen to me. You don't belong to this place. You don't have to. This is what it wants you to believe." Her tears splashed onto his cheek as she clutched his face in both hands, forcing his gaze away from the abyss. "You're not a monster. You're not this town. You're you. Fight it, Daniel. Fight it for me." Her words tore at him. For a heartbeat, he felt the smallest thread of himself, the boy who used to laugh with her, who used to dream of leaving their small lives behind, of building something real, something human. That boy was still there. Battered, buried, but there. The abyss screamed. The reflection snarled, its smile twisting. The roots whipped violently, smashing shelves, sending flaming lanterns tumbling to the floor. Fire spread through the library, the orange glow colliding with the red light of the abyss until the room was bathed in hellfire. Daniel's body was pulled halfway into the fissure now, his legs swallowed by writhing roots. Clara's arms locked around his chest, her face pressed into his shoulder as she refused to let go, even as flames licked at her hair. "Daniel," she sobbed. "Please, don't leave me here alone." The words broke something open. He realized then that he wasn't fighting for himself. He wasn't strong enough for that. But he could fight for her. For the only tether to reality he had left. With a scream that ripped from the depths of his lungs, Daniel drove his nails into the wood of the library floor, blood slicking his fingers. He wrenched his body upward, dragging against the skeletal hand, against the roots, against the pull of his own reflection. Every inch felt like being flayed alive. His mind fractured with pain. The abyss roared louder. His mother shrieked, her luminous face warping, her voice breaking into dozens of others. "No! Don't resist. You'll destroy us all. Then burn with me." Daniel roared, his voice shaking the very walls. Summoning strength he didn't know he had, he shoved Clara upward, away from the fissure, then drove his bleeding hand into one of the shattered lantern flames. Fire seared his flesh, but he didn't let go. With a final, desperate thrust, he slammed the burning wood into the writhing roots that bound him. The effect was immediate. The roots shrieked as though alive, recoiling violently. Flames surged downward, leaping into the fissure, igniting the abyss itself. The glowing faces below erupted in screams, their features melting into smoke. His reflection writhed, its burning eyes bursting like shattered glass, until it dissolved into ash. The town screamed. Not the people. Not the wind. The town itself. Its howl shook the earth, splitting the remaining walls, collapsing the roof. Fire raced through the roots, climbing, spreading, consuming. Daniel felt the skeletal hand release him. Felt the weight lift from his chest. For the first time since he'd arrived in Greybrook, he could breathe. Clara pulled him to his feet, dragging him through the burning wreckage as the library collapsed behind them. The ground split wider, buildings crumbling into the abyss. The entire town was collapsing, devouring itself in fire and shadow. They stumbled through the streets, choking on smoke, racing toward the forest. The houses they passed twisted grotesquely, windows screaming, doors splintering. Shadows poured from every alley, but the fire consumed them just as quickly. The town was dying. As they crossed the boundary of the forest, Daniel looked back one final time. Greybrook was no longer a town. It was a writhing mass of roots and fire, collapsing into itself, pulled back into the earth like a beast finally slain. His mother stood at the edge, her body glowing faintly even as the flames consumed her. She raised one hand toward him, her expression unreadable, anger, sorrow, maybe pride. And then she was gone. Silence fell. The forest was dark. The air was cold. In Graybrook, the town that wasn't there, was nothing but smoke rising from the earth. Daniel collapsed to his knees, sobbing into the dirt, his body shaking with exhaustion and grief. Clara knelt beside him, her arms wrapping around him, pulling him into her chest. "You did it," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You killed it. You're free." But even as she said the words, Daniel felt something stir deep inside him. A faint, pulsing throb in his veins. A whisper, softer now, but still there. "Come home."